This is the Phantom X2 Pro, the new flagship from Tecno. Tecno is a very popular brand in African markets and more recently in the Middle East, so could this be a sleeper hit in the premium class? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our Tecno Phantom X2 Pro review. The Tecno Phantom X2 Pro is a high-end phone with an emphasis on photography. The unique 3D design of the camera bump immediately grabs your attention. The cameras stick out individually quite a bit, and they have their own color accents too. Both the Phantom X2 Pro and the non-Pro model have a very similar look actually, but the Pro version brings something special, a dedicated portrait camera that pops out of the phone. It's motorized and might catch people by surprise. The X2 Pro's overall design may be polarizing to some, at least in this bright orange finish. The back panel here is made of finely textured recycled plastic, and it curves into a metal frame. The phone feels solid in hand, but maybe a bit top-heavy. Unfortunately, there is no official ingress protection here. The display of the Phantom X2 Pro is a large 6.8-inch curved OLED with a 1080p resolution and a 120Hz refresh rate. It's always nice to have a fast refresh rate smoothing out your swiping and scrolling, and there's support for high frame rate gaming. The screen will dial down to 60Hz when idling to save you a bit of energy too. Of course, the screen, being an OLED, is quite contrasty and sharpness is good too. There is no support for HDR video though, which you might expect from a high-end phone. And the color accuracy isn't great either, with whites appearing on the bluish side. Where this display really falls behind the competition though is when it comes to brightness. At least at the time of this review, we were only able to achieve around 500 nits maximum, and there's no boost in auto mode on top of that. There is a light sensor and even a high brightness toggle in settings that doesn't seem to work, so maybe it could be fixed someday through a software update. While most premium phones have a stereo speaker setup nowadays, the X2 Pro has just a single bottom-firing one. The loudness isn't very impressive, nor is the sound quality. Charging speed is nothing special. The phone comes with a 45-watt adapter in the box, but it was able to charge the phone from 0 to just 39% in half an hour. But on a more positive note, the battery life of the X2 Pro is pretty solid. It has a large 5000 mAh battery and was able to earn an endurance rating of 109 hours in our tests. The chipset is quite solid too. It's a flagship-grade Mediatek Dimensity 9000, built upon a 4nm process. It provides great performance on par with phones running on the top Snapdragon silicon. The gaming performance is excellent, and the phone has no problem in pushing heavy games beyond 60 FPS, with no hiccups or slowdowns to speak of. This smooth experience translates to Tecno's iOS 12 interface as well. That's despite it being heavily customized, with tons of proprietary features and pre-installed apps that send you notifications from time to time. But in this regard, it's not as bad as we're used to seeing from Tecno. You can wake up and unlock the phone with an under-display fingerprint reader. It's quite reliable. And the Phantom X2 Pro comes with 256 gigs of storage on board. This isn't expandable through microSD though. Finally, we're on to arguably the stars of the show, the cameras. The X2 Pro has a 50-megapixel main cam, the retractable 50-megapixel portrait zoom camera, and a 13-megapixel ultra-wide cam, all with autofocus. During the day, the main cam captures solid 12.5 megapixel photos. There's plenty of detail, good dynamic range, and nice sharpness. The colors look natural too. If you shoot in the 50 megapixel mode, you can actually achieve a bit more fine detail, while maintaining the other qualities of the photos. It's a nice option if you don't mind the large file size. You can take portrait photos with the main cam, and these are pleasant looking, with great subject separation. But since you have that dedicated portrait zoom camera, why not use it? This camera gives 2.5 times optical zoom, so you don't have to stand so close to your subject. The portrait cam can also be used to take regular 2.5 times zoomed photos. These are nice, really clean and sharp. And since this camera has an extra wide aperture, it's able to provide a natural blurred background behind a closer subject, even without the portrait mode on. The 13-megapixel ultra-wide captures surprisingly clean and detailed shots as well. The colors are natural looking, consistent with the other two cameras. In low light conditions, the main cam performs well. There's plenty of detail, low noise, accurate colors, and decent dynamic range. The light sources are a bit blown out though. Turning on this super night mode addresses this problem. You get better contained highlights and more detail in shadows, plus some extra sharpening, all at the cost of a 3 to 4 second processing time for each shot. The portrait cam struggles a bit more than the main one at night. Shots come out darker and a bit softer. Also, the colors and white balance are noticeably different here. Still, there's low noise and plenty of detail. Night mode helps the portrait cam a lot. The images are a lot sharper, and you get more detail. Light sources are handled a lot better too. The ultra-wide cam produces soft photos in low light. At least the colors are consistent with the main cams. The night mode doesn't seem to help the ultra-wide that much. The 32 megapixel selfie cam shoots photos with plenty of detail and great sharpness, with pleasant skin tones. We only wish it had autofocus like the other cameras. When it comes to video, the main cam can shoot in up to 4K at 30 FPS. The quality is decent, with plenty of detail and natural colors. The look is a bit too contrasty though, and the dynamic range isn't amazing. In low light, 4K video from the main cam is solid. The exposure is on the darker side, but there's plenty of detail and light sources are well handled. In daytime, 4K videos from the portrait camera look a bit cleaner than the main cams, with better fine detail. The colors look natural, but again the contrast is a bit too much. The ultra-wide is limited to 1080p, and these have a decent amount of detail for the resolution, and the color rendition is a bit more vibrant. Again, there's a lot of contrast, and the dynamic range could be better. There's electronic stabilization available on all of the cameras, and it does a nice job. So that's the Tecno Phantom X2 Pro. This is a phone that's pretty solid when it comes to things like the chipset, the cameras, and the battery life, but there are a handful of shortcomings too. The charging speed is on the slow side, you don't get stereo speakers or ingress protection, and probably the most impactful is that at the time of this review, the screen doesn't get very bright. So overall, the Phantom X2 Pro is an alright phone, but the downsides make it a bit tougher to recommend. Thanks for watching guys. If Tecno has piqued your interest, here are a couple of their other phones we've reviewed on our channel. Last year's Tecno Phantom X, and this year's Tecno Phantom 19 Pro. See you next time.